In this video, I'm going to show you how to automate 99% of your content workflow so that you can streamline your content creation process from creation all the way to distribution. Let's do this. So creating content can be a pain. If you're not doing it yet, you'll find out. And if you're already doing it, you know what I'm talking about. So staying highly organized from the beginning is very important in terms of creating a streamlined content marketing workflow. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use 3 different tools, Zapier, Airtable, and Google Drive to streamline that content workflow from the very beginning all the way to distribution. So the way I'm going to go about this is I'm going to start with Airtable. I'm going to go ahead and create a base from scratch, a new database that has never been used before, and we'll start to configure that. Then we'll move on to Google Drive and how you might structure the format of the folders. Then I'll show you a basic Zapier automation that will take files when you drop them into Google Drive and they will import them into Airtable. And then ultimately we'll get back to Airtable and we'll design some basic workflows so that you can understand how all this works and how you can create your own customized workflow for yourself. Let's go ahead and do this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open up your Airtable account. If you don't already have one, you'll have to create one, and then you'll want to add a base. So once you add a base, it's going to give you a default table. We're going to go ahead and change this right off the bat, but it's going to start off with name, notes, assignee, status. This is just a default database that they give you that they think might be helpful to you. We're not going to need most of this. So starting out, this is your primary field. We're going to go ahead and create an auto incrementing ID. We'll come down here, auto increment. We'll just call this ID. We'll create that field. We'll move it over here. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make this a formula. And you don't have to do it this way, but this is just the way I've done it for a while. And I'm going to concatenate a C with that auto incrementing ID. And that way, every piece of content that I create is going to have this content or the CID as I call it. And then I really don't need to see this one, so I'm going to go ahead and hide that. I'll go ahead and rename this to content ID. And so some of the initial columns that I know we're going to need is, we're going to need this, but instead of calling it notes, we're going to call it description. And then definitely going to need a status field. So I'm going to take this one here. They've already created this one to do in progress done. I'm going to call this in progress needs review and done. So we'll have that. And I'm just going to build this on the fly. And then if we need to make tweaks to it later, we can. Definitely going to need a publish date. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. We'll create a publish date. And we'll go ahead and create. So we're going to need a link to the folder that we create in Zapier. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. Folder URL. And we'll need a direct link to the media that's uploaded as well. So I'm going to add that. Media URL. We might also need like a content type. So I'm going to create a single select field content type. We'll go ahead and call this vertical video. This might be for like a TikTok. And then I'm going to create, maybe we have a webinar. Maybe we have a live Q&A, and maybe we have a podcast. Just a few different examples. I'll go ahead and create that now. And then maybe if it's a YouTube, actually, let's do this now too. It could be a YouTube video. And then in that case, we might need a attachment for a thumbnail. So now we can put an image in there if we need one. And then we're also going to need a place for the copy or the description of the post, right? And if it's a YouTube video, we're going to have a description of that video so we can create a place to do that. All right, so that's the basics of a database. So let's get some content in here by designing the folder structure for our organization system, and then we'll create a Zapier automation so that we can get content into here, and then we'll design some basic workflows that can inspire you to create your own automated content database. So I have this YouTube demo folder here. I'm going to create the structure of the Google Drive folder structure in here. So the main things that I've used in the past is really an inbox. So any kind of new video that's coming in, we'll create an inbox for that. And that way, any kind of raw video that we want to capture, we can drop into that inbox. And then I usually create some sort of processed folder, which is where all of the processed video ultimately goes into. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and start to create the Zap process. I'm going to go ahead and create this Zap here. And the main thing we're going to want to do is really just anytime a video is dropped into the inbox, we're going to want to trigger off of that and get that into our Airtable database. So I'm going to pick Google Drive. So now we need to set up this trigger. What is the event that we're looking for here? In this case, we're looking for a new file in a folder. So we'll click that, go ahead and continue. We're going to choose the account, and then we're going to set up the trigger. In this case, we're going to be using my drive, and then we'll set it up to the YouTube demo. What this is going to do is this is going to trigger whenever we drop a new video into the database. So now that I have this set up, I can come over to this YouTube structure. I can go into the inbox, and then I can drag and drop a test video file into the system. Now that's in the inbox. And now I can start to test this. If I hit test trigger, couldn't find anything. Sometimes you got to do it twice. And now that I realize that this is actually a good lesson learned, I'm realizing I didn't set up the trigger on the inbox. I set it up here. And so it's not finding that. So I got to go back here real quick, update this, and then actually go to the inbox. And now if I upload that file into the inbox, now the trigger should properly run. So now we're going to see that file in the folder. And what you're going to notice is that Zapier pulls in a bunch of information about that file. And these are all different things that we can store into our Airtable database and ultimately store to facilitate our workflow down the line. So let's just start to work through that a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the row to Airtable. And the reason why I'm going to add it now, even though I haven't fully processed the file and created folders, is because I need to create that row in order to get the CID, because I need that CID later on to properly create folders and different things. And you'll see why that happens. All right. So now let's add the Airtable row. And one thing here is I did come back over to Airtable and I renamed this to Content Distribution Database. So it was just easier to find when I go add and link up the Airtable database. So event, I'm going to create a record, pick the Airtable, and now I can pick the base. And in this case, we picked the Content Distribution Database table. We only have one table right now. It's named Table 1. We should probably come back to this and update this to something else. We'll come back after that. And so the main thing we're trying to get at is this content ID. So when we create this row, it's going to give us that ID, and then we can use that later in the process. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't really need to add anything right now, except maybe I could add the media URL because we have that. So I'm going to grab this alternate link. This is the best link to use from Google Drive. I'm going to go ahead and add that. I'm not going to do anything else. Let's test the action. We can come over to the database. We can see now we have C4 and we have that media URL. So if I click on this, it's going to take us straight to that video that I uploaded. It's right here. I could play it. This is a video that I was doing for a TikTok, and you'll notice it's still sitting in the inbox. So we still have a little bit of processing to do to finish this automation, but we're in a good spot now. So we have the row. And the main thing is that we also have that ID. That's the important part, because we want to use that ID throughout the rest of the process to facilitate the automation. So really the next spot is like, we need to get this out of the inbox. And what I like to do is I like to create a folder that I can put that action in. So I'm going to create a Google Drive here, or an action Google Drive. I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to create the folder with the ID that I got in the Airtable step. So we will move along here. Again, you're picking the same parent folder. In this case, I'm the YouTube demo. In this case, I'm going to go into process. So this is going to be where we create that folder. But so now we have that CID that we can use for the folder name. And if you want to add something else here, like the original file name, you can do that as well. So we had the test video file. If you want to, you can add that. Not necessary. And so now we have that. So we can continue. So we're going to get C4 test video file MP4, test the action. So now if I come back over here and processed, we're going to see that folder, which is great. Then I'll come back to the automation. And then I mentioned I have this step here that I added that we need to remove. So I'm going to come in here and delete this because it was just an accident. So now we've got the trigger on the new file. We create the database record. Then we create the folder. So now what we need to do is we need to move this folder that's in the inbox into the new file that we created. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. So let's move the file. And so the file that we need to move is from the original step. So we're going to go over to custom here and we're going to go to step 1. And what we need to do is we need to find the ID of that file. So we're going to click that right there. And then it's going to ask us for the drive again. A lot of repetitive actions that we take. And then in the folder, we're going to go into the YouTube demo. Actually, in this case, we're not going to go this way. We're going to come to the custom because we're going to go straight to the folder that we created, open that up. We take that ID there. And so now what we're doing is we're taking that original inbox file and we're going to move it into the processed directory that we created here. So now if we test this, continue, test action, we should see that file get moved into this folder. Sometimes you got to refresh it to see it. Let's go back and see what happened here. All right, so a little bit of debugging. And so what I'm finding here is that it didn't copy over. And so sometimes what's actually happening is the test record that we're using here is not the one that we originally set up. So it looks like this is the new file that we were actually supposed to use. So when you're going through this process, what ends up happening here is that each of these different files, remember I uploaded an original file in that inbox to begin with, and then I removed it. So what was happening here is that Zapier was using that original file as the example, which isn't the file that we're using now. So what I did was I came back to this trigger here. When you're testing things, you can actually select which file you're working with. So I needed to work with this file, which is the second file that we uploaded. I'm going to continue, and then I'm going to go through these steps real quick again because I need to test this action. I'm going to create the record in Airtable because the one that I created before is different. So we're going to create a new one. You're going to notice it's a different ID here. And then I'm going to continue through. Actually, we need to test the action here as well. I'm going to create a new folder because it's going to be CID 5 this time, right? CID 5. Retest that action. It's going to create CID 5 or C5. So now we've got C5. And then when we finally move this file here, we're going to rerun this one again, retest the action. Now we're going to see that file moved over to it, right? And it's no longer in the inbox. Great. So now we've moved the file successfully. That's the trick. You just have to be real careful when you're building these zaps out that you're testing on the right file all the way through. It's actually good that we ran into that issue because I was able to debug it and start from scratch again and ultimately show you what might happen when you're building this out. So then we can move on here. So now we've moved the file. The last thing we really need to do is update the original record with all this information, right? So we created the cloud folder and we moved it. But now we need to add some of that information that we created here back into this record. So now I'm going to just go back to Airtable and we're going to update the record, continue forward. We're going to pick that base again. Remember, this is the content distribution database. Add that here, pick the table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick the record. So we have to update the record and we're going to want to update the one from here. So we'll click this. We'll click custom, and then we're going to click this ID that we created here. And now here's where we have a chance to enter in some of those other things. Like we might want to update the description, and in that case, we're just going to use the original file name. We'll leave the status, the published date. So now we want the folder URL. So here we have create folder. We can grab that, show all options. Again, use the alternate link here. We can get that. Media URL, we already entered that in the first step here when we created the Airtable record, so we don't need to re-add that now. And we'll continue, and then we can finally test the action. And so then if we jump back to the Airtable database, we're going to see it was able to update that process there. So now we have a full cycle, a zap that's going to be fully functioned, and I can actually publish this zap now, publish and turn it on. And now if I drop in a file, I'm going to name this one a little bit different, test video file number 2. I can drag this into the inbox, and then now it should walk through this entire process on its own without any intervention from myself. So if we sit and watch the Airtable database, you'll notice we created the row and then it ultimately updated it with the folder and everything. So now if we click into the folder, we're going to see our test video number 2 and it's in the process folder. And if we go back to the inbox, nothing is there because everything has been processed. And now we've got a direct link to the media. We can go right to it. And we've also got a direct link to the folder. And now we can start to think about what are some of the workflows that we can add to this get all the way to publishing, and then you can start to think about how your workflow works and you can start to tweak it from there. So the first thing I might do to process and start to build some workflow around these different files that are coming into the database is really to start to think through, okay, what are the different steps that I need to go through in order to take a file from a raw video file all the way to a finished video, ultimately publish it. So there's a few different steps there. Obviously, the step number one is really kind of almost to process the inbox. And you have to ask yourself, okay, what fields do I need to define so that I can say that I've processed the inbox, right? Because you have all these video files coming into the database, but you're going to have to do a few things like status. Is it in progress, right? So if it's a raw video, you're going to want to move it to in progress. You're probably going to want to pick a publish date. You might also want to pick what type of content is this. And just if you're not as familiar with Airtable, this is really just a spreadsheet on steroids. So if you think about the different tabs along the top here, those are the tabs that are usually on the bottom of a spreadsheet. And the views on the side here are really just filters. So we can filter and create different views of the data however we want. So in this case, I'm going to call this one the inbox. And so I'm going to create a filter that says anytime the content type is empty, or anytime the publish date is empty, or the status is empty, then I want to show those fields here. And so that's what we have. I'm going to delete these ones that were kind of more test records that had some problems. And so what you might do at this point is like when this video comes in, you're going to say, what type of content is this? Is this a TikTok video? In this case, it was. So in this case, we're going to say or, right? So it disappeared. And the reason why it disappeared is because it says all of these things have to be true. But what you want to say is, are any of these things true? So we're going to change that to an or. So now this is unedited. So we're going to say status in progress. And then we're going to pick a publish date. We'll pick next Monday. And so now what's going to happen, it's going to disappear from the inbox because we've defined all of the different things that we need to define for this piece of content. So when I hit this, it's going to disappear. These three things are now satisfied. So in this case, I said it's in progress, right? So that kind of leads me to believe that this is a file that needs editing. So now we can create a new, and there's lots of different types of views here. So you can add a Kanban board. Let's start with just so needs editing. So now I can create a view here that says where the status is in progress. And I can also just highlight, I can hide some of these fields that I don't need. So it needs editing. And so that means that we're probably going to need, have one that needs review. And in that case, what we're going to want is a filter that's only showing us the status where needs review. So now if we're in this state and the editor updates the video, so then he or she can move that to needs review. And then whoever's reviewing the videos can now see this. And you can do this in different ways as well. So we'll talk about the Kanban board. So video status, you can look at it this way, and then we can pick status. So then you can look at it this way. You can see how the videos might go through the workflow in this way, right? So then when it's done, now we can create a view that's like ready to publish. And so now we're going to want a filter that says only show me the content that has a publish date. So we'll say is not empty. And then this video could be published on this particular date. And you can also create calendars as well. So if you want to see the published calendar, we can do that. And then we can pick the published date. And so then we can see that this piece of content here is scheduled to go out on Monday. You can customize the labels. So if you want to see the description, you can do that. And so you can now see it visually. And so there's obviously a lot of different ways you can configure these workflows. So you'll want to think through your workflow and how that works. For instance, if we go over to ready to publish, we also need a thumbnail. So if this was a YouTube video, right, we're going to need a thumbnail and we're going to need a description. You're probably going to need a description on the TikTok video as well. So you can create workflows around that, right? So you can say, we could create a view here that says needs image. You can move this up. And in this case, what we'd want to do is select the different content types that would need an image. And in this case, it'd be a YouTube video. And then we could say, and thumbnail is empty. I'm going to create a view that shows me everything, because sometimes when you're creating these different filtered views, you get into a spot where you can't find the data you want. And so what I just did there is I just added a view that's going to show me everything. There's no filters. It shows me all the columns. So in this case, I can move this content just for testing. I can move it to YouTube video. And then ultimately, if I come back to needs image, we're going to see that row show up there because there's no thumbnail. So if I upload a thumbnail to this, it will drop out of here. So for instance, I can go to thumbnail. I can drag in C4 here and upload that. And now that image is going to be associated with that row. And then of course, now it disappears because it doesn't meet this criteria anymore. So you can see you just start to build out the workflows along the side in a variety of different ways that most suit your workflow. And then you can really just push the content through. And so this piece of content is ready to be published. And so on that date, the person who's responsible for posting can come in here. I'm going to hide this and make it a little bit more streamlined for that person. They can come in here and they're going to have direct access to the media. So they can click that and they can download it. They're going to have the thumbnail. And then of course, again, here, you'll probably have wanted to create the copy and the description for this video as well. And so that would have been another workflow that you would have added into the views along the side here. And just like a little bit of cleanup, we're going to want to rename this table. We're going to rename it to content. And then as you build this out, there are opportunities to create other columns or other tables, other columns that support your workflow. And we'll probably visit some of those in a future video. And so one of the things you also might want to do is an auto upload to YouTube. And that's something that you can also facilitate in the Airtable database with Zapier or other tools like Airshare. And so I will go over those in a future video. But just to kind of lay the groundwork for that, in that case, what you're going to want to do is you're going to create a view that's auto publish to YouTube. And in order to really facilitate that, right, you're going to have everything ready for that video. So you're going to have to hide these different fields. You're going to have the description. This is ultimately going to be the title, and you're going to need that media URL, and you're also going to need that copy. So you're going to want to set up your filters to make sure all of that is there so that you didn't try to upload before that condition happened. But I'll go over that in a different video. And we'll create a series out of this, and we'll take a YouTube video and we'll upload it to YouTube. So there you go. That's how you can start to automate your content workflow with Airtable, Google Drive, and Zapier. So make sure to check out the next video. I do use Zapier in order to upload a video directly from Google Drive up to YouTube. So that'll show you an example on how to do that. And then you can integrate that with the database that you're building here today. Check out that video. I'll see you there. I'll see you next time.